Hello all, welcome you all to another session by Ability. This is Revati and I'll be your host for today. Hope all of you are doing fine and are keeping safe. It's lovely to have you all here with us today. In our today's session, we'll be discussing about the effective techniques for improving self-regulation and impulse control among children with ADHD. In this session, we would discuss in detail about the strategies and techniques to help children with ADHD think before they act. This session will be conducted by Ms. Shivani Wadhwa. She is a counseling psychologist and a remedial therapist. More about her a little later. As we wait for our fellow friends to join us, let's sit back and enjoy some music. Seems like most of you have joined us and few of us would join us throughout the session. Now I would like to discuss with you all about the flow of today's session. The session would begin with a presentation followed by a Q&A discussion. During the session, there will also be certain activities. So share your inputs, ideas, and suggestions in the chat box by addressing it both to the panelists as well as the attendees by selecting that option in the chat box. With no further ado, let's begin with the session for today. A quick introduction about ability.
Every child is unique and wants to thrive. Excellent carers can help a child blossom. To achieve excellence, educators and therapists require years of experience and mentorship. We at Ability are obsessed with how we can reduce this time to excellence by bringing the best knowledge from around the globe and yet make it very affordable. We believe this is very important to do for the community. Please join us in the movement to bring out the best in every child. Besides the knowledge sharing from various experts through community webinars, we have embarked on our next journey, and that is to provide you with more knowledge through workshops across learning paths, specially designed for you. Starting with ASD, ADHD, behavioral, speech and language development, motor skills, remedial English, and maths. We intend to cover more areas as we learn from you what you need and create more resources for you. As an Ability member, you will have access to at least 6 live workshops every month, which are part of each learning path, and unlimited access to the past workshop recordings. You will also have access to the resources management tool and the student success tools. If you want to start using them in your practice, please ask our support group. We will send you guides on how to use them. Very soon, we will also be offering you an opportunity to be part of the curated community and mentorship programs. More will be shared when we are ready. As mentioned earlier, among our experts and ability team, we have specially created several resources for you to download and share with anyone who can benefit from them. For every workshop you attend, we will also be sharing the relevant resources with you post your learning. So don't forget to register for the workshops that we have specially organized for you and continue to give us your most genuine feedback so that we can improve and continue to build value for you. Thank you, and we shall see you at the workshops.
Moving on, let me now talk about the Ability Referrals. For those of you who have been part of the Ability team, would already be aware of Ability Referral program. But for all our new members, Ability Referral is a program where we believe that learning becomes more fun when we do it together. So by giving your friend or a colleague a free month, you would get an additional month for free when they renew their membership. You can share your referral code in any social media platform like Facebook, Twitter, or just by copying the link and sharing it over any social media platform. And if your friends renew, you would get an additional month for free to continue your learning with Ability. How interesting is that? Now, Let me introduce you all to our resource speaker for today. Ms. Shivani Wadhwa is a counseling psychologist and a remedial therapist, having years of rich experience in helping and serving children with special needs. She aims to empower individuals to reach their potential emotionally and academically. She is also a certified SOI practitioner and a phonics master trainer. She is also the founder of Samarthya, Nurture a Better You. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. We are excited to learn a lot from you today.
Thank you so much. A very good evening to all the viewers. Hope you're all doing safe. Before we begin with today's session, let me take you through the overview. So this is the overview of today's session. So we would be discussing about ADHD and impulsivity in today's webinar. And we have to understand why impulsivity is important and also what are the strategies that would help improve the impulse control in an individual. Along with that, we would also be taking you through the toolkits that children can use that will help them to stop, think, and act so that they become more conscious of their actions. So, this was shared with all of you in your emails so that you could go through, and it is a takeaway for you to remember as to what was told in the entire session of the 2 hour. So, now we would be beginning with our presentation for today. So, and now, when we talk about ADHD, it is important we understand what is the meaning of ADHD before we get into the different dimensions associated with it. So, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder that causes deficits in the brain. A very important thing to remember is that it does not affect the intelligence level of the individual. What does it actually do? It affects the person's ability to regulate attention and emotions. Because of ADHD, there is hyperactivity and impulsivity seen. Along with that, it also leads to organizational problems. So, ADHD is a disorder that affects the person's ability to pay attention and control their impulsive behaviors. So they are divided into two categories. So ADHD with inattention and ADHD with hyperactivity impulsivity. The third type becomes the combination of these two. So when we have to understand impulsivity, what exactly is impulsivity? What does it do to a person? So basically, impulsivity is when individuals have difficulty in stopping themselves. They have an inclination to act without thinking. So they act on an impulse rather than their thought process. They have difficulty to curb their immediate reaction. They don't think once also before they act. For example, a child is in a classroom. So the child should know that when we have to speak, we raise our hand. But that simple rule is forgotten. So they speak without raising the hand and or they would start passing inappropriate comments. Moving on, we have to understand what are the components of impulse control. What does impulse control actually require? Impulse control, if missing, definitely requires appropriate intervention. It is a very hard skill because an individual should know how to filter out the impulses. It requires self regulation, internal motivation, and coping strategies when they see themselves getting into an impulsive act. Self control is very, very crucial for impulse control. So, it is crucial for planning, prioritizing, time management, and persistence. What would actually happen if impulse control is missing? It could be the root cause of behavioral problems. Why, in an individual, is impulse control important? So, when we talk about the impulse control helps an individual to think before they act. So they are able to make conscious decisions. They are able to think better about their answers before writing them down. They have better critical thinking skills to solve problems when they are in control of their impulses. What an individual could do when their impulse control is better is that they are better at understanding and following instructions. They can tolerate more frustration and they are better at solving problems. They can stay focused. For an example, if a child is not able to control impulses, their focus and attention is also affected. So when we have an ability to control our impulses, they can stay focused and persistent for a longer period of time. They can also have controlled inhibition. When we talk about the relationship between brain and impulsivity, so impulsivity is a primary symptom of ADHD. So one of the symptom when we talk about ADHD is attention. The other is hyperactivity and impulsivity. So what does it do? It affects the person's ability to stop and think. So they, before acting out, they do not think. So they definitely engage in consequences before speaking or acting. So what happens here is the thalamus area of the brain is the area that gets affected. So in this area, this thalamus stops the brain to receive signals, and that is why their behavior gets affected. So there is also impulse control affected in the prefrontal cortex. So when we talk about the prefrontal cortex, the brain part, that is the prefrontal cortex, does not develop until the 20s. So the tendency to act on an impulse gets delayed if it is not properly activated. So what could be the causes or reasons of impulsivity in an individual? So when we talk about why a person is unable to control their impulses, there could be various reasons. One could be genetics. The other could be brain injury or damage, as we discussed, the prefrontal cortex or the thalamus area. ADHD, if diagnosed, lack of adaptive coping skills, lack of emotional regulation, low frustration tolerance personality. The personality of an individual also affects. If there is an environmental factor, that is lack of exposure to rules. If there has been a negligent parenting style, there is a lack of exposure to rules. Definitely, the impulse control of an individual would be affected. Substance abuse is another cause for impulsivity. Now, when we have to figure out is actually impulse control affected in an individual, these are certain red flags. These red flags are the indications that if most of these behaviors are present, it could indicate that yes, impulse control is affected in the individual. So what are the different impulse control behaviors? Let us check. The first thing is the child speaks out or blurts out answers. Second, the child interrupts classmates or anybody around speaking. They give up on games easily, so they don't wait for their turn to win. So one attempt, they don't win, they give up. So they style to barge in between the lines. They cut in front of others while waiting in the line. They jump from seat. They ask questions about irrelevant topics. They show physical impulses, unable to sit. They show hyperactive behaviors. They jump to conclusions when they are being spoken to. They react strongly to criticism. So when anybody is trying to give them a positive, constructive feedback, sometimes it's not taken well by these individuals. They get sidetracked by strong emotions. They have difficulty in maintaining personal boundaries. And while doing a particular task, they have a tendency to jump from one task to another. They also get easily distracted, cannot stay on one task for a longer period of time. They have difficulty organizing things around them and also sustaining attention. And other thing is that they have difficulty in looking at the smaller picture while looking at the big things. So these are certain, red flags that an individual has when their impulsivity would be affected. So when you are looking at an individual and I see most of these red flags being present, it is advisable to see and rule out ADHD or impulse control deficits. Moving on, when we talk about research on ADHD and impulsivity, a Michigan University study indicates that children with type 2 ADHD, that is, they are having hyperactivity and impulsivity, they are more likely to engage in disruptive behaviors in the classroom setting. So behavioral problems are commonly reported in terms of using abusive language, either pushing or pulling their fellow classmates, or becoming physically violent among children. So yes, impulse control is strongly related to behavioral issues. So now when we talk about how can we deal with these impulsive behaviors. So these are certain strategies that are on a general level to help individuals or children deal with their impulses. The first thing is labeling feelings. Repetition of instructions, teaching them problem solving skills, anger management skills, establishing ground rules, providing structure and being consistent. Implementing a reward system helps. Being a role model is extremely important. Encouraging outdoor activities and peer support groups and playing impulse control games. So these are the broad categories, and we would discuss each one of them in detail as to how they could benefit a child dealing with impulsivity. So, when we talk about labeling of feelings, it is extremely important when children get impulsive, we need to teach them to label their feelings. Children sometimes find it difficult to understand what they are going through. They're not able to understand the emotion that is affecting them. So, when they are unable to understand what is going on inside them, they are more likely to be impulsive. A child who cannot say that I am angry may try to bang the doors or may try to hit somebody to show that they are upset. Or a child who's not able to say that I am sad because of so and so reason, they might start throwing temper tantrums by throwing themselves on the floor and screaming. So the moment we teach our child to recognize feelings, they can start to control their impulses better. So when we start teaching children how to label emotions, talk the difference between the feeling and behavior, that's when you would see them becoming more controlling of their impulses. So you need to tell them that it is okay to feel angry, but it is not okay to hit somebody. So we need to help them demarcate between the feeling and the behavior. So we focus more on teaching them how can they label their feelings. The next thing that you could help children that will help them to manage their impulses is to repeat instructions. So when you see these children, they're in a lot of hurry. So at that point of time, they may miss out on important information. So you could ask them to repeat what has been told. So kids who are impulsive, they do not listen to directions completely. So when you are giving them any instruction or any idea or any plan, tell them to listen. Once that is done, ask them to repeat before they take an action. So you could politely ask them, okay, what did I just tell you to do? Once they are able to repeat back what you said, whether it is to clean the room or put certain things at their place, then you allow them to do the action. So when you give an instruction, before they do an action, in between, you need to ask them to repeat what have they understood. Another important thing is to teach problem solving skills. So when we are working with children, we have to tell them that when you are, seeing anything around you or you are encountered with a problem, there is more than one way to solve it. So we need to look at possible and potential solutions around us and not jump quickly into one thing. So whether the child is trying to fix the broken chain of the bicycle or trying to figure out the math problem, encourage them to brainstorm. The moment they start to brainstorm, they're stopping and thinking. So, teaching problem solving skills is very, very important. Along with that, you help them to evaluate which solution is most likely to be effective. And with practice, when you brainstorm and you talk to them, with practice, they get used to thinking before they act and they don't jump into conclusions immediately. Another important thing is to teach the anger management skills. Since children are not able to control their impulses, they may act out. Like we discussed, that they would not be able to, label their feelings. That's how they may be acting out. And at that point of time, they may be throwing their anger out. At that point of time, you realize that anger management skills are very important to be taught to these children. So, the low frustration tolerance may lead to impulsive outbursts. So, when we teach them the anger management skills, they're able to deal with their emotions in a healthy way. So you can teach them specific strategies like when you feel angry, either you drink water, you count from 10 to 1, take few deep breaths, go and color, take a soothing color, try coloring it on an A4 size sheet. That is also removing of energy, the anger energy from the individual out onto something that is not going to harm the other individual. Also, walking around the house to burn off some energy. When we start giving them these tricks on a repeated basis, at that point of time, they would start imbibing it. All these skills cannot be developed overnight. It definitely needs practice where we are working with the child to help develop this kind of a coping mechanism. The other thing which is very important is to establish ground rules. For a child with ADHD, a key thing is to establish rules. You need to set clear rules and also your reasons behind them. Be simple in your words and your language. Show them what your expectations are before they enter into any new situation. When they understand that when they are walking into a library or walking in a grocery store, they are less likely to misbehave. So when they are entering a library, you need to give them the instruction or a clear rule that you cannot scream, you cannot shout, you need to have a softer tone. All these things need to be clearly stated before they are entering into a new situation. And they always need to be told so till the child gets a hang of it. Explain negative consequences of breaking the rules ahead of time. Once they are aware of the negative consequences, they'll be better at informed decisions. And when they get into understanding that if I do this, this would be my consequence, or if I do this, I am doing the right thing, they would need your support. Initially, it becomes difficult because that's the first time they are getting into, but with your support as parent or a therapist, they'll be much more aligned to do this particular kind of things. So establishing rules is extremely important for them to make better informed decisions. Providing structure and being consistent is very important. So it is linked to the previous point. So when we are setting ground rules and the child does not follow that particular ground rule, one time we may be strict, the other time we are letting go, the third time we are like, okay, next time you better do it. There is no consistency. If you really want the child to improve, be better at controlling impulses and have better self-regulation, very, very important that you're consistent in your behavior towards the child. Either as a parent or a therapist, consistency is extremely important. Keep your discipline consistent as well as your routine of the child. So at that point of time, there'll be less chaos. So you need to offer them reminders like, you need to hold my hand in the parking, or you don't need to run when we are crossing the road. We need to wait. We are at a grocery store. Please don't leave my hand. Be here with me. All these reminders need to be given with these children, because anything, if they are at a grocery store, they see their favorite chocolate, they would run. So you need to constantly give them reminders. With practice and constant reminders, they will get accustomed to your rules and the consequences for breaking them. That is why it is very important that they are knowing that whatever they do, it is going to be the same behavior from your end. So if they break the rule, either it's today, tomorrow, day after, any day, the same consequence would be coming to them, and the consequence is not dependent on anybody's mood. The other thing is to create a reward system. Rewarding child's good behavior is very, very helpful. They get motivated. You can reward them with tokens, then the token is exchanged for bigger rewards. So you can have the marbles, or you can have the coins, or you can have stars. That is the system of token economy in behavioral therapy. You can also create a reward chart for your child. At this point of time, if they collect 10 stars, they get to eat their favorite dish. And if you collect, 5 tokens, we'll go to a park. You can get 15 minutes extra playtime. So all these things can be decided in coordination and age of your child. But remember, please don't shift these tokens in an exchange of a materialistic thing. Very important. Your verbal praises and giving them these things like, trip to the park or 15 minutes extra playtime would not do harm. But if you engage in the materialistic things, demands would keep on increasing. A very important thing when you're dealing with children with ADHD is that it is important to be a good role model. So children learn by observation. So when children learn by observation, when we are, as adults are able to regulate our emotions or are able to control our impulses, they are also watching. So we need to model appropriate ways so that they also develop the same. So when we are waiting in a line at a grocery store or anywhere else, and if we are learning to wait patiently and are tolerating delayed gratification, the child would be noticing that. So you can say statements like, this is a long line, but we need to patiently wait for our turn. So the child is realizing that irrespective of the line being long, my parent is waiting patiently instead of going ahead and, causing trouble to the other fellow people in the line. So becoming a role model in these cases where you yourself are self-regulating and controlling your impulses would help your child also to do the same by observation. When children are impulsive, they're unable to control their impulses, they have a lot of energy in them. So you could encourage physical activity, playing outdoor. So a child who has had an opportunity to run, jump, climb are more self-disciplined rather than children who are not allowed to do so. Limit the screen time, encourage them to play outside whenever possible. So I know the pandemic is going on, it's difficult sometimes to send children out, but engage them in physical activity. You could be like, okay, Simon says jump, or you could tell them that I want you to jump 10 times, hop 5 times, skip 2 times, and then come back to me. So you could devise ways in which you are encouraging physical activity. They can play hopscotch, they can toss a ball, they could play tennis, anything that is feasible in which their physical energy is being channelized. Playing impulse control games helps a lot. So a resource is being shared in that you have a lot of information about the impulse control games. So you could play games like Simon Says. Simon Says, run. So you'll make the child run. Simon Says statue. Simon Says jump. So you're making them do that. So they are in a go that, okay, this is what I have to do. And they are eagerly waiting for your reaction. The other game that you could play is the red light and green light. You can modify it as per your own things. You would tell that when you could have a red color, paper or color something, and you could show that flashcard and be like, when I show you this or tell you red light, you will stop. When I show you green light or tell green light, you will run. That is first thing. You can actually interchange that. So when you interchange that, what would happen is that at red, the child would run, at green, the child would stop. So that way they get confused, they learn to control impulses. Also, you could be like shifted. So if I say red, red, green, they would be like stop, run, stop. All those things can be modified when you're working with children. You can also make them play board games like the Ludo, Snakes and Ladders, where they actually have to wait for their turn. That also helps them to control their impulses. Reduce immediacy and urgency. Those kind of games in which they can engage in such kind of things is important. Important consideration to note is that with practice comes better self-control. So you make sure that your practice is fun. If you force them to be like, no, you have to sit here for longer periods of time, you have to pay attention, and the task is boring, the efforts may backfire. The child would resist sitting with you. So it is very, very important that you make the practice fun so that there is better self control, and ensure that there is consistency in whatever you do with the child. And only with practice and consistent discipline will the impulse control improve. As discussed earlier, we noticed that impulsivity is linked to violent behaviors as per the research study. So, we need to understand how we could work in this direction to help children who are impulsive and are indulging in violent behaviors. What happens is that the child starts hitting others or himself when he doesn't get what he wants, or the child is running on the road and not listening to the parents, throwing things in anger. All these are destructive behaviors that come because of lack of self control. So, when you have to help children having this, we have to indulge in these strategies. So, we need to monitor and exclude the violent media that they are watching. So, these days, there's a lot of passive screen time happening. Passive screen time is where there's no learning happening, there's a lot of engagement in the games. So, what these children do is that they play games where there's a lot of fighting that they see. So when they see those individuals playing with guns or hitting one another, that also becomes an observational learning, because of which children all tend to become more violent. Do not give in to tantrums or aggressive behavior. This is extremely important because once we give into it, the demands of children increase, as well as they learn to understand that if I throw a tantrum, my things are going to be heard or adhered to. So if a child is having tantrum at the grocery store, they want a particular chocolate or something and we don't give in and buy it, what is this doing? This behavior is becoming rewarding for the child, and it is a reinforcing of inappropriate behavior. So it's very, very important that when you have decided that you would not be buying that to the child, irrespective of temper tantrums, it is important to stick to the ground rule that we have created. So it is also important to know the patterns of triggers as well as temper patterns. So you could figure out, is the temper tantrum happening before going to school every day? Is it that before the child sits to study when the teacher comes or the tutor is coming and the child is starting to throw tantrums to avoid that particular person or that particular task? All these things need to be identified. A very important thing is to stay calm. When a child is expressing a lot of emotion, at that point of time, the parents also become more emotional, and there's a lot of emotional dysregulation between the two individuals. When the child is screaming, the parent or the therapist also tends to scream. At that point of time, what happens is that the child's aggression increases. So, what we need to do is we need to stay calm when the child is screaming or talking at, at the top of his voice. So, we are modeling emotional regulation for our children. So, we are working on structuring the morning routine. There's a proper structure and a proper timetable for the child, breaking down tasks into simpler activities and giving them warnings like we are leaving in 10 minutes, and continuously repeating that we are going to this place for this work. I request you to follow the ground rule set. So set goals such as may they have to make it to school on time, like out of 5 days a week, at least 4 days they are able to adhere to it. And if that happens, you engage in the reward system. This is what you could do when there are violent behaviors. Most important thing is staying calm as well as reducing the passive screen time, because now there's a lot of sensory overload happening because of the same. When we have to deal with children or help them to accommodate such kind of children in the classroom, we have certain strategies that could be followed by teachers and inclusive schools. In a class, there's always instructions that are being given. So the instructions, whenever given to these children, should be clear, concise, and simple. Again, in the classroom, it is important to have the child repeat back the rules. When the child is telling that, okay, this is the rule. So when I enter the classroom, I'm supposed to say, excuse me. The child is trying to remember those ground rules, whatever are the expectations and the instructions. So when the child repeats, the teacher is ensuring that they have understood, because sometimes we feel that the child has heard, but the child has not actually heard as you want it to be understood. Also, we need to understand that these children, when overloaded with a lot of information, can tend to forget what was previously told because of their impulse to complete the task before time. So, when giving them any instruction, what could be done is that we are giving them only concise instructions in one or two step directions. And also, we could use terms like first, go to the cupboard, second, get your English book. So, when we give this kind of an instruction, it becomes easier for the child to know the steps that I was first told to do this and second told to do that. Students with ADHD are also susceptible to distractions. So, an important thing is that their seating position. So, they should be seated away from the classroom disruptions. They need to be seated near the teacher, away from the window and the doors where they can get distracted. So, seated near the class teacher is always helpful. Providing praise for their good behavior, irrespective of the environment, whether it's the school environment or the environment at home, definitely is a motivating factor. When we are praising them for good behavior, ensure that it is immediate. Immediacy effect plays a very important role. Also, if there are certain negative behaviors that are seen and you see that it is not disruptive and it is minimal, sometimes it is best to ignore it. These children also have difficulty sitting for longer periods of time. So you can give them opportunities to get up and move around. Probably it could be like, okay, you can go sip water and come back, go wash your face and come back, or have a round, or go check what your friend is doing, because sometimes they tend to finish their work faster, and then you can have them as a buddy to somebody else who's not completed their task, where they could go there and check. So when there's an opportunity to get up and move, they also are able to control themselves better, and that urge of moving around is not piled up for longer periods of time. Children who have difficulty to control impulses also tend to fidget. You'll see them, rocking the chair, or, hitting with the pen or pencil. At that point of time, you could give them sometime tactile to manipulate. So then they have something in their hand, they won't be disrupting the classroom. So you can have a squish ball, or you could have the fidget spinner. Even this during the online classes can be used. So, for a child with ADHD type 2 who's having hyperactive impulsive behaviors, can be given the squeeze ball or the fidget spinner in hand and have the child to listen to the class when there's a lot of fidgeting happening, so that there's not going to be much of disruption in the classroom by the child, and also the child would learn to sit at one place because the child is engaged. Arrange for peer support. So when we pair these children with ADHD with a kind, willing, and mature classmate, it's a beneficial experience for both. So this child study buddy can give reminders when the child is not able to focus or not able to stay on a particular task, and sometimes act as a motivator and provide encouragement. So these are certain strategies that we can engage in when we are working with these children. So when we work with these children, these little tips would help us. But sometimes we need to give children also toolkits that will help them to pause, reflect, and plan their action out. At that point of time, when the child is doing that, you can take them ahead by discussing with them, so that over time they realize that, okay, this is what I had thought for myself and I will start implementing. So this will help the child to stop, think, and act. So when we talk about the first strategy is known as stop and think. So there are certain questions that you could ask the child, and the child could also write it down. What am I supposed to be doing? So when you engage in this conversation, if this is a particular situation, what am I supposed to be doing? You could also do role playing with such children so that they understand what are they supposed to be doing. Count to 3 before acting. Do I need a sensory break? Sometimes children with ADHD need a sensory stimulation. So they need to figure out, am I needing a sensory break? If child is too young, the therapist or parent could think about if the child is in need of some sensory stimulation. Stretch my arms and take a deep breath. Take 3 slow deep breaths in and 3 slow deep breaths out. If I don't know what to do, I would raise my hand and ask, what am I working for? So these are certain questions which are imbibed in the child's mind, or these are certain to do things that the child is given and spoken to about. And from here, the child picks up his or her 3 favorite things which he feels that could be applied. So maybe the child could be, I want to count to 3 before acting. So whenever a child is indulging in or taking a decision or wanting to do something, you need to remind that what was it that you thought? Count to 3. Okay, I'm counting and then engaging it. That way they are actually pausing and taking the action. Or some of them would say like, I would like to stretch my arms, take a deep breath, and then move ahead. So that way they choose their 3 top things with the help of the parent and therapist that will help the child to have better self-regulation. Now, these are certain activity worksheets that you could use with children while helping them to understand what is their perspective, how well can they regulate themselves, and also how can they control their impulses. So when they have to do that, these could also be used when you're having a talk therapy session with children who are very impulsive or adults and they're not able to control themselves. So this is one thing. What's okay where? You can modify it as per your level of the child that you're dealing with, as per these situations. So what I have taken here is I've decided about the classroom for children is important as recess, that is their lunch break, and in the hallway. So you need to explain them that there's a time and place for everything. Now look at the circle below, and for each chart, there are 2 behaviors. What is okay and what is not okay. So you discuss with them and make them right. So this brainstorming activity will help them to again pause, reflect, and plan. So if they are in the classroom, they would be like, I need to raise my hand while talking. I wouldn't be pushing my classmates when I want to take something from the teacher. What is not okay? All those things are decided. Not okay is shoving in the lines, jumping around. What is okay? Raising my hand, saying, excuse me before entering. So at that point of time, at recess, if I need to take somebody's food, sometimes what happens is that they would see their friend's tiffin is very exciting. They would just go grab it. So you need to tell them that you need to seek permission. I need to ask, can I take it, please? All these things will help the child to brainstorm and realize what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. The moment the child starts to realize this, they start to regulate themselves better and have better control on themselves. When you get this resource, you could modify it as per the scenario or the environment where you feel your child needs to improve. So it could be like one is in the classroom, one could be at home, one could be at a family gathering, one could be with the tuition teacher, anything where you want the child to focus on and improve their self regulation. So that's how you could go ahead with this worksheet. The other thing is the anger map. So when you see that anger is the major problem, teach them to label their feelings, understand the emotions, and accept their feeling. Then you can take them through this anger map. Ask them to draw. What is the kind of face you make when you're angry? What things do you say when you're angry? How do you behave when you're angry? What happens to your body when you are angry? What is your anger helping you to achieve? What are the other ways in which I can handle my anger? Maybe the child is banging the door. When you ask the question of other ways of handling my anger, sometimes they may not be able to give you. So you could give them alternatives. You could be like, okay, drink water, stretch your arm, take deep breaths, get a light blue color it on an A4 size sheet. You will help them do it. If they are not able to write it, or if they are not able to, put their things into words, but you could use these questions with them and have an open discussion where they're verbally able to express, if not written expression. But these questions are really useful to help them gain an insight into alternative things. You can also ask them questions as to, have you learned anything about your anger? What helps when you are angry? You can also ask them these questions. What are their perspectives? If you feel something needs to be altered, brainstorm with them and help them understand the importance of viewing things from a different perspective. That way, they will develop better anger management skills. Now, this is also a very nice resource that you could use with children where they are very excited to tell you as to which emoji are they feeling. Now, what has happened? Why are they feeling so? So they are thinking, why did I get this kind of a feeling? If they can't write, they would dictate or tell it to you, and you could maintain a record sheet of the same. You could ask them, you felt frustrated. What happened? My friend did not listen to me. I have been telling him from so long. Okay. After that, what did you want? I wanted to take control of my friend. I wanted to talk to a teacher my friend didn't allow. I wanted attention. So all these are options. Something other than that, if the child says, it could be recorded. How did your behavior make other people feel? We actually, when brainstorming with children, we forget to develop empathy. At that point of time, you could tell them that, yes, I understand you felt frustrated, you wanted so and so, but can you tell me how did your behavior make other people feel? They would at that point of time also think, okay, I felt frustrated. How did my friend feel? They would be like happy, scared, sad, confused, worried, angry, frustrated. I was frustrated, my friend felt angry. So they're understanding that their particular feeling and behavior definitely affected the other person. Did you use a coping strategy? Yes. Which one? If no, what could you have tried? At that point of time, the child sometimes would be like, no, I did not use any strategy because I did not know what I had to do. So you could be like, don't you think you could have moved away from there, had some water, and come back again? You would have felt better. You could have calmed yourself by counting backwards. You could have taken a break. All these things will help the child know that if I am having this kind of a situation, maybe next time I would do so. So you are making the child more understanding that there are different coping mechanisms, and you're empowering the child with constructive ways of dealing with a particular situation. What do you need to do now to correct the problem? So when we are dealing with impulse control issues or behavioral issues with children, we actually forget or get lost in our thoughts as to how are we going to deal with this kind of a situation. So when a child has had disruptive behaviors, taking them through these series of questions will help them to understand that how their behavior is affecting the other, what could they do better, and what do they need to correct. If you see the last question there, what do you need to do now to correct the problem? Apologize, clean up, complete the work, make a plan, solve the problem, or do something nice. So at this case that I discussed would be saying sorry because my frustration caused anger to my friend because I was seeking attention and control. So the child understands that there is a way in which I can sort out things in a proper manner. So you can record the time in, you can record the time out, how long did it take with you for the child to discuss all these things. So all that can be recorded in the think sheet. This is another activity that will help children to, look at the impulse, what could they have thought about it, and what is the action that they could have done. So what are you thinking about doing? There are 3 questions that the child could be taken through in this activity to decide how they are supposed to act on their impulse. First is, what are you thinking about doing? What will happen if you do it? And if you don't do it, what is the best choice? So stop, think, and go. I'm thinking about cheating on my math test. Okay, what will happen if you do? What will happen when we are doing this is that if I'm cheating on my test, my teacher can catch me, I would have a bad image, my friends would start, teasing me. If I don't cheat on the math test, I'm being true to myself. What is the best choice? That way you're brainstorming the child. This is also another activity where the child is made aware of consequences. When you are setting ground rules, along with the establishment of ground rules, you could also use this worksheet where you're helping them analyze the consequences. At that point of time, you can write your actions. These actions are hypothetical. Again, you can create based on the child. So child specific actions can be created where you brainstorm them for the consequences. Consequences can either be positive or negative. You stay up late playing video games. What is the consequence? I would get up late. My entire day has a disruptive schedule. I would have, what else could it be? I would be affecting my eyesight. My academics would be affected. So let them have consequences. My parents would scold me. My screen time would be taken away. All those things can be brainstormed. You clean your room when your mom asks you to do. I get to watch my, I get my TV time if my room is cleaned on time. You skip a class, I'm missing out on a particular concept. I would not be allowed to the class for the next 2 days if I'm skipping one class. So these are all hypothetical things. You brainstorm the child with the action that needs to be focused on for that particular child. You don't know the answer on a test, so you copy the answer from someone else. What is the consequence? There's another activity in which the child learns to monitor their own self. So when the child is given this self-monitoring checklist, they are encouraged to do that by themselves. So these are certain cutouts that you could have to make your sessions with children interesting when you're working on their self-regulation and impulse control. You could have these cutouts of skills, as you could see here down, depending on the child. A few may apply, few may not apply. Then you're asking the child to create their own self-management tools or self-management checklist that they are going to follow for the coming days. So sometimes you see that the child is not participating in the class or is not following directions, does not stay in the seat, does not keep the pencil still, continuously keeps making noises. So at that point of time, you have those things in your, cutouts. When discussing with the child, ask them to pick up 4 things that they would be working on and 4 things that you would also monitor with them in their support. So at that point of time, when the child realizes that I'm working on these 4 things and the therapist or the parent would be monitoring me, I would become more conscious that whenever I do that, I realize I'm being monitored and curb my action. That way, they become more conscious of their actions and leading to self-regulation. The other activities that one can engage in for improving self-control is the puzzles, the mazes, the spot the differences. They have the activities in which you search the words, crosswords. All these are helpful to improve self-control. So these kinds of mazes. This is another activity when you are engaging them in alternating attention. This can also be used to control their impulses. So the person would keep saying that cloud, frog, sun. So they'll be like, okay, is it the mango or where is the sun, like this? Sun, then they go to apple, elephant. We keep saying these things and they're in a hurry. Where would they go or which word would be coming? So while doing this activity, they are keeping a check on the auditory stimulation and then acting upon. So these kinds of activities also help them to improve their self-control. This is another activity sheet that we can engage in with children that will help them to again regulate their impulses. So, which is the one that is similar to the one that is presented? So, though they are twisted, but which is the order that is right for these children? So, that has to be selected. So, when we discuss all these activities, will help them improve their self regulation. Even board games and the other Simon says red light, green light, when you play with them, engage them and let them understand their own self. Self awareness is the key when it comes to self regulation. The more they are brainstormed as to, okay, when a particular situation is given to me, this is what I do, but this is how I should do instead. When they're given with a lot of opportunities, options, problem solving skills, they tend to, have better control on their thoughts and impulses. So, this is how you could move ahead when we are dealing with such children. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Lovely session throwing light on multiple aspects with that of understanding ADHD's impulsivity and also about how to deal with this impulsivity through various strategies and techniques. I'm sure our participants have learned a lot as well. I've seen a lot of questions in the chat box, but do put your questions in. But before we take in your Q&A segment, I'll share a few things with you all. I see a lot of questions in terms of whether the recording would be shared and also the resource materials. Please be assured the recording of today's session, the slide deck, and also the resources would be shared with all of you in mail in another 3 days' time. Now I'm going to quickly take you through where is that you will be able to access these resources. So as part of each of the workshops, we've been creating exclusive resources that you can use with your children to learn more about the concept and practice them. So all you have to do is log in with your credentials into Ability platform and click on Student Success here. So you would be redirected to this page where you will have to click on exclusive resources. So every resource that's being prepared for each of the workshop would be shared with you all. You will have an option to open the resource. You will also have an interesting option to preview the resource to see what the resource is of, what is the type of the resource, and then you get to download the resource. An additional feature that we also offer is for you to rate this resource so that you can let us know how effective or useful this particular resource was for you. You will also have another interesting provision where you can share all the resources with anyone who you think would benefit from it over any social media platform directly from here. Another interesting provision, because most of us run out of storages and we find it very difficult to access particular resources after a long period of time. For all that, we have a simple answer here where you can just bookmark the resource and you will be able to find the resources in the bookmark session to quickly access them. I'm sure you'll all benefit from it. As part of today's workshop, you would be receiving the action and consequences worksheet, Stop, Think and Act worksheet, and also you will be receiving interesting videos on how to deal with impulse control and also self-regulation in children with ADHD. I'm sure you'll all benefit from the resource that's being shared. Before we move on to our Q&A segment, as part of the ADHD series, we'll also have an upcoming workshop in the month of August 17th, where we'll discuss exclusively about how to develop executive functioning skills in children with ADHD. The link for the same is being shared right now in the chat box. If you're interested for the same, do register yourself. Now let's begin with our Q&A segment for today. The first question is from Marito and multiple others. Although you have shared some strategies with regard to self-regulation and impulse control, if you could share some insights about how these strategies can be adapted in online session.
Yes. So when we talk about the online sessions, as I told you, the rules have to be consistent, irrespective of it being online class or a physical classroom that the children are getting into. These activities of brainstorming by questioning and giving them the alternatives helps. That is, there is a two-way clear communication between the individuals. At that point of time, the child also understands what are the expectations and what are the alternatives and what would be expected. Same way, when we talk about the worksheets, you could take the support of the parents to ask them to make a Xerox of it, and you could be giving instructions where the parent is supporting the child to do so. You could also play online games like Simon Says by telling them that when I say blue sketch, you show me a blue sketch or you show me a red sketch for green color. So that way you are helping them to control impulses. So all these activities, sketch pen activity, when I tell you are modifying it for the Simon Says. You can also take it for green light and red light, where they're using red sketch for something red color and green color on their side. All these things you could also tell them that I tell you, go bring me a spoon, get me something red color, get me two of your favorite toys. So they're in a hurry, they come back. At that point of time, you can give them multiple instructions, like three-step instruction, first, second, third. Ask them to repeat and then do that particular action. So most of these that have been told, you can modify it in the as per the level of the child and start using it in your online sessions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think a lot of people like practicing online would benefit from it. Next, we have a question from Miss Varsha. Although she's not here with us today, it would be good if you answer the question. So her question is, can you suggest certain techniques for self-regulation among children with ASD? And the techniques that you've shared right now, will that be useful for children with ASD as well?
Okay. So when we talk about self-regulation is affected in children with ADHD, sometimes in children with ASD, sometimes those with conduct disorders, but the underlying strategies remain the same, and you could use these techniques whenever the child is having impulse control or self-regulation issues.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Miss Krishna with us. Okay, so let me post his question on his behalf. So his question is, sometimes children find it difficult to solve problem together because they lack the motivation or they do not want to engage in a discussion before they engage in problem solving. So how to actually help them engage in a combined problem solving approach and help them to continue discussion with us initially when they are trying to solve problems? If you could share certain tips.
Okay, so when you want to initially work with problem solving, it is very important to have rapport with the child. Rapport building is the first step. Then, when the child has become comfortable with you and is adhering to your instructions, then make it a two-way communication. The more you engage the child, the better the child also feels to get engaged with you as a therapist or a parent. Similar manner, when you want them to have problem solving skills and brainstorm with them together, you need to first build rapport and then engage them. Sometimes they would not be comfortable or they don't want to proceed with it. Give them a break. Pushing them to do at one particular time so much would actually backfire and they would not be interested in anything further with that person. So it's important to take it at the child's pace, giving the child certain time to get accustomed, but at the same time, you are setting up clear instruction that we are here to help you through, and together we are going to work out through this problem. So your communication pattern, the words you use with the child also impact.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure that answered Ms. Krishna's question. Next, we have Ms. Sveta's question. Her question is that how to help adults deal with ADHD. If they're diagnosed with ADHD from the childhood, what are certain strategies that could be used when they are in their adult phase?
So when ADHD is prolonging from childhood, first thing, it has to be diagnosed, not just by our words that because we have certain symptoms, we are telling ourselves to be ADHD. It has to be a proper clinical diagnosis. Secondly, after that, all these strategies where we are making our own self monitoring checklist, Irrespective of us being a child or an adult, we could get into self-monitoring checklist and see how are we able to move through it. Definitely the content of the checklist or 4 target areas that we are setting would be different, but the same can be applied. Same way in stop and think, we come up or we choose from those particular things as to what are the 3 top things that we would be engaging in. If we are working and have impulsive behaviors as an adult, we could tell ourselves to, walk around, come back, take short breaks, also indulge in certain physical and sport activities. The same, but on a higher level, is applied if it is an adult.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the lovely insights. Next, we have Miss Ganjot Kaur. I'm sure I'm spelling the name correctly. Not excuse me.
It's Gagan Jot.
Gaganjot
Gagan
Kaur.
Jot. Hello.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
No, I was just asking how to about psychoeducate all those parents. They sometimes they don't even know about the ADHD children. We have it, but as a teacher, we observe them, and we actually relate a lot many problems in the classroom. But as a time, like as teachers, how should we tell the parents, to go about such thing, to do the strategies at home? Shivani ma'am has already, shared so many activity sheets. So if we are doing it in the school, so they can also help us, as teachers to build up a thing that, they can correlate the problems, of the kids also. So my question is just how to psychoeducate those parents also.
Yes, it's a very important point because unless parents are made aware of what the child is going through, you won't be getting them their support. So, psychoeducating the parent, psychoeducating the teacher, both of it is important. And how do we go about it is we cannot directly tell or label the child with ADHD. The first step is the communication with the parent to figure out how the child is in the home setting. Once you get an overview of how the child is in home setting, you could ask them that these are certain things that we are facing at school, that the child is not able to sit for longer periods of time. The child, pushes others, wants to always barge into conversations, always blurts out answers, which is disrupting the class. Do you see these things happening at home also? So when these things are they happening and the parents are agreeing to it, then you could tell them that it is important for us to have you support us to help the child. That could be one way. And sometimes you also need to send the child for diagnosis. Which kind or which level of ADHD the child is? Does the child need external intervention as well, along with the teacher support? So, all this needs to be spoken to the parent. But first, we need to build rapport with the parent, understand how the child is from their perspective. If they are saying, yes, we are also facing the same difficulty, then you could let your views out. If the parents say that no, things are all right at home, then you could express your concern and be like, but ma'am, at school, we find these behaviors and we need your support in handling this so that the child is benefited. So, either a teacher or a parent, the child is the core person who needs to be helped to reach and develop to the highest potential. So, when we communicate with the parent or either with the teacher, our child's positive development should be at the core. So, keeping that point ahead, we speak to parents in such a manner and also seek support from them that it is important we work hand in hand to help your child so that in the next coming years, the child's academics do not suffer because of these behaviors.
Beautiful insights, ma'am, because the importance of the support of the parent as well as the teacher is very crucial to help the child out. So when actually throwing a light on how it impairs a child's development throughout, actually makes them realize and take a step instead of just blaming this child or like pinpointing their symptoms or the signs. I think that would be another addition that we can all keep in mind and we'll all benefit from. Next, we have Miss Arva with us. Okay, so let me pose Ms. Arva's question on her behalf. So this is an extension to the question that was asked earlier. So her question is, how as teachers can we let the child know who's disrupting the other children in classes or engaging in violent behavior? How do we let the child know or talk to the child to make them become aware without hurting their feelings or sentiments, or without shaming them before the other classmates?
A very important point. This makes me remember the quote that we say that when we have to praise a child, praise in public, but we want to correct the child, correct in a one-on-one meeting. So it's always important then when we need to speak about the hindrances the child is causing, it is important that we speak to the child not in presence of the classmates, but alone. So this way the child would also feel respected that yes, I am not being shamed in front of the class, but my teacher is trying to explain me these things. And when you see the child showing even a little kind of a positive change in class, appreciate the child in class in presence of the others. So when the child feels that I am being appreciated in presence of others, but when there is certain things that have to be corrected, that's being corrected privately by the teacher or the person who has an issue, the child learns to become more encouraging by your words that okay, this teacher respects my boundaries and this is how I would be progressing and I will try my best to make change. So when you need to deal with children, deal with criticism, change on a one-on-one meeting, but praise them in front of the whole class. I hope this would help you when you would have to deal with children or correct them.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think the quote for all of us to remember is, the children will never forget how we made them feel. So that's very important. I'm sure we'll all work towards making their school life a best one for them. Next, we have Miss Fledruris with us. So she has an interesting question with that of online session. Okay, so let me post a question on her behalf. So she says she's encountered this challenge during online classes. The child is diagnosed with a type 2 ADHD. So during the class, he would randomly start chatting with the other classmates or open any search tabs and start doing something when the teacher is providing any instruction or like taking classes. Despite multiple instructions and reminder, the child has continuously been doing this. So what are certain techniques or ways to help this child minimize this behavior? If you could share your insight, that would be great.
So when the child is continuously chatting, that means you have to see which teacher or what is it that the child is seeking from the chatting behaviors. It is the attention from the classmates. So sometimes you could discuss with the child is what is it that you want to share with the class. He would want to share a particular exciting event or something. You could take the support of the teacher and request a 5-minute talk with the child so the child could share the particular experience which he wants to and is eagerly waiting. If that is not the case, constant monitoring. Maybe the child needs someone sitting beside to stop that urge. Initially, the child would need someone beside so that the child is 24/7 monitored. But once the child understands that I'm not going to do it, you could start reducing your intensity by sitting with the child. So talk to the child when you see certain tabs on, that again is not in control of the person on the other side of the screen, but somebody who's beside the child. So when you see that such behaviors are increasing a lot, the person or the support system with the child beside needs to be present throughout. So that's the way the child would learn that I am not allowed to do so. So even if we leave the child for 5 minutes, these kinds of behaviors are occurring. So a few initial days, we need to be there constantly beside the child, and only then the child would realize that curbing is important. Also, if the child could seek social stimulation where he wants to interact with peers, or there's a lot of curiosity about a particular topic that the child is opening tabs. At that point of time, you need to see, you could also lock, sometimes there's a lock feature of YouTube, or they put a passcode where the child could not access. Those little things could be indulged in if there are so many issues that the child is facing. So you limit the accessibility on the screen.
Thank you so much, ma'am. An additional question, an extension question to this question is being asked by Ms. Meenakshi. So she asked how to help children who keeps randomly calling us, because it's virtual classes right now. So they have an option to give us a call when the classes are even not being held, right? So how to control or deal with this behavior?
Okay, so I think your ma'am is on the teacher side and the child is constantly calling. So when that happens, you need to seek support from the teacher. Once or twice you could answer, but the moment we start answering, it becomes a pattern. So you need to once talk it out to the child and address and be like, it is important that we have our own boundaries. I will speak to you during the school time. If there is anything, you write it down in a notebook, whatever the points you want to tell me, or even if you just want to tell me a hello, write it neatly, beautifully on a sheet of paper and show me all those points the next day. So teach them whatever, that impulse they have to talk to you, rather tell them to put it down on paper and share that paper with you or click a picture and send it to you. Because if we start to, put those things away that, don't call me, don't share with me, the child would try to have those negative thoughts and it could have a reverse effect. So, very subtly, the child needs to be explained that verbal communication cannot be possible. You want to tell some things to me, please note it down. You can make small greetings, you can have those things written on a paper, click a picture and send it to me, or show it to me the next day in the class. So that's how there's this one way that you could help the child from binge calling.
Lovely insight, ma'am. I'm sure, like, without hurting the sentiments and the feelings of the child, but also setting the ground rules in a very assertive way. I'm sure a lot of us would benefit from it. Next, we have Miss Usha with us. Okay, so let me post Miss Usha's question on her behalf. So she's asking, how long will it take for a child to control their emotions? Because once the child starts engaging in a temper tantrum behavior or crying, it goes on a very long period of time, right? So do we have any ideal time with which the behavior will settle down?
Okay. So there's no time limit because each child behaves and reacts differently. How you react to each situation is also going to be different. So there's no timeline. But if you really want to reduce its intensity, have clear set rules and be consistent. Over time, it would go. Sometimes we also would lose patience that it's been so many days. I have been trying the same thing, but my child is not improving. But since in the beginning we have made it as a reinforcer that the child threw a tantrum and we gave into it, the child is hung on to it. So it would take time, and the time differs for each individual. There's no fixed time for the same.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure like this will set us like clear everything about the temper tantrums and the way to handle it, because a lot of people feel that okay, after some point in time the behavior in itself will settle down, but it doesn't work for every child. So having an intervention in place is also important, and consistency is the key so that the child also understand what is important. Next we have Miss Shanti. Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, I'm a pre-primary teacher, and I have a parent who has been coming to me. I mean, very regularly. She even gives me a call now that the child is no longer my student. Despite that, she calls me, and she earlier she used to always tell me that this particular child who is 3.5, 4 years old, he misbehaves very badly at home. He locks the grandparent, beats the parents, spits on them, gives very bad words to them, all kinds of horrible things he does with them. But when he comes to school, I find that this child is extremely well behaved, very soft spoken, completes all its work, completes its tiffin in a very neat manner, and I cannot believe that it is the same child now. So the each time the parent is going on coming and telling me, ma'am, aap aise kya karte ho jo bachcha aapke saath aise hai.
Right.
So I don't know what to tell or how to handle this.
Okay. So see, I don't know the proper case history, just a gist that you have given me. Can I know the age of the child so I could provide a few insights?
4.5.
4.5. Okay. So if a child is of that particular age, in this age, the children learn more from their surroundings. So there's a lot of observational learning happening. So we need to understand what kind of a family structure is happening, what is the child exposed to back at home. Second thing, we could actually get into conversation with the child to figure out Why did the child engage in those behaviors, to understand the home environment or the triggers that cause the child to have this kind of behavior. Is the child watching something, watching someone, or what is the trigger point with which the child has done this? So if the child is not doing this behavior at home, means that the child has not learned this from the school environment. Probably there's something in his locality back there where he is living in and out, and those behaviors are expressed. So we can talk it out to the child to figure out what happened and what was the cause of that behavior. Also, you could figure out what was the family dynamics and how are other people at home reacting to anger situations.
I hope that gave Ms. Shanti an insight on how to deal with this particular child, or like how to manage the child's behavior and like to guide the parent as well. Next, we have Miss Edlerin with us. Okay, let me post a question on a behalf. So, question is, what are some of the techniques that teachers can use during online classes when the child is trying to engage in negative attention-seeking behaviors?
So if there are negative attention seeking behaviors, what are the negative attention seeking behaviors? Can they be ignored? Can the child be removed that kind of an access? Since it's an online thing, there are certain settings you need to check that. Third, take out some time out from your classroom schedule to at least spend with the child and figure out what is the child wanting. So the child is getting into a negative attention seeking behaviors because of certain stimulation or needs that are not being fulfilled. Probably the child has so much to say and there's nobody to listen either back at home or in the school environment. Since it's an online setup, not all children are given the opportunity to speak and share how their day was, because when there were physical classrooms, each child would share how their day was. They were open to communication, but now there's been a lot of boundaries and changes. So you could have a one-on-one interaction with the child to figure out what the child is actually wanting. Again, depends on the age group. If it's a younger child, you can also get into reward system. Older child, see why this is happening, figure out the triggers, and see why the child is engaging in this thing. Positive reinforcement could help the child to help control such kind of impulses.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So understanding what function the behavior serves will actually help us to guide the child and also manage the child's behavior better. Next, we have Ms. Shobi with an interesting question. Okay, so let me post a question on her behalf. So, question is, does timeout work with children with ADHD? How effectively does it work with children with ADHD?
It works. For children with ADHD, timeout is an effective strategy that you could engage in.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. If you could share a little more light, because for the other participants to understand what timeout is, if you could just give a brief about it, that would be great.
So when we talk about timeout, timeout is an activity in which we are helping the child to figure out what are the impulses. So you tell the child to do particular this task that the child has to complete at a particular given point of time. For example, you could create certain rules. You should help the child know that this is the consequence if the rule is broken. So what are we doing at this point of time is you're making the child understand that consequences are going to be a part of it. And if the child has not completed a particular kind of task, the child would not be getting what the child wants. So you are going to be like, you have a fixed period of time to complete certain things. If not done, there is a consequence for the same.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure now, like a lot of people who had a doubt about what timeout is and how it works would have a great clarity about it. Next, we have Ms. Sakshi Jain. So we have a lot of questions in terms of assessment per se. If we could answer a few of them, that would be great, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, my question is there any educational tool to assess the child with ADHD, or is there an educational checklist to work with the child with ADHD?
Yes. there is both. You have a tool as well to diagnose children with ADHD, you as well as have a checklist. The checklist is available on the Ability Resource platform. And if you go back and look at my previous learning paths and the sessions that were conducted with coordination with Ability on the ADHD tools, the entire Vanderbilt assessment tool has been explained to diagnose the type of ADHD. So we definitely have a standardized tool as well as a checklist to identify if the child is having the issue of ADHD.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering the question. All the participants who want to know more about assessments, the tool, and like what is the right way to go about with the assessment and the checklist, you can check out our previous workshop on the ADHD learning path, which would be available to all of you in your on-demand section. And you'll also be able to access the resources in terms of the tools so that you can use it with your children. Next, we have Miss Michelle. Okay, so Ms. Michelle's question is that how early is it important for us to diagnose children with ADHD? And in case if we don't diagnose ADHD at an early stage, what are the repercussions that we would encounter at the later stages in life?
The age of formal diagnosis is 7 years. Before that, these are red flag symptoms that need to be kept in mind, but the formal diagnosis is done at the age of 7 years. If not diagnosed, what happens is that those patterns become strongly imbibed in the child, and the intervention would take longer for the child to improve. So the early intervention plays a key role. The earlier we identify that the child is having these issues, the better coping mechanism the child develops, and the child also improves. It's not that the child won't improve if the identification is late, but the time taken to show improvement would be longer. So early intervention definitely helps in the help children to cope better with whatever issues they are having that ADHD causes.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for again reiterating the component that early intervention is key as it helps the child in multiple levels. So the early it is, the better it would be for us to actually intervene also and help the child to progress in the normal phase of development. Next, we have Miss Claire Bell. Okay, so let me post a question on her behalf. So question is, what are certain additional things that teachers can keep in mind when they know that they have children with ADHD in their classroom?
So when you know that there is a child with ADHD in the classroom, first thing we need to avoid using the term that this is a child with ADHD while communicating with others. We need to focus on helping the child rather than labeling the child. Second, the rapport with the child will help the child to become comfortable with you and also listen to your instructions, because these children find it very hard to obey and follow rules. So when you want that from the child, you need to have proper rapport building and have open two-way communication for the child to express what they are feeling. For this child, you could give positive reinforcements, verbal praises, as well as develop a reward system. At the same time, you could have a non-verbal gesture to ensure that the child is got back to attention when the child is indulging in certain kinds of behaviors. So you could be like, when I put a tap on your back, that means that you need to come back to your focus point, or you need to stop troubling others. Or if I show you a blue card, that means that we need to come back to our actual action that is not disturbing others. So these kinds of little things can be devised or created between you and the child, which only you and the child know, and you are helping the child to be out of such things.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I'm sure like all of us could refer to the strategies that were shared during the workshops and also the previous recordings of the workshop, which is available to you all, where a lot of exclusive strategies on classroom management is discussed in detail. And I'm sure we'll all benefit from knowing all of that and applying that in real setting. A lot of questions in terms of whether this techniques that you shared today can be applicable to children with ASD, because they also have an issue with self-regulation. If you could share your insights, that would be great, ma'am.
Yes, so this was answer, I think one of the participants had also asked, whenever the self-regulation issue comes, it is a comorbid with ADHD, it's a comorbid with ASD, it could be a comorbid with disruptive disorders or conduct disorders. The same strategies can definitely be applied, but you need to modify it as per the age and the issue. So if we are taking the what's okay and what's not okay card, we need to modify it as per the setting in which we need to brainstorm the child with. So modifications can be made, but the same strategies can definitely be used.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure that clears a lot of doubts that participants have. Next, we have Miss Daphne with us, Daphne with us. So her question was that, is there any specific food that children with ADHD should not be given? You could
Yes,
share.
apparently, yes. They talk about, the white products being avoided for these children and sugar products. So when we get into dealing with ADHD, sugar rush causes them to become more hyperactive and impulsive. So these things, if avoided, like the jams, the sauces, the cream biscuits, the cookies, anything sugar that is causing them a lot of hyperactivity and impulsivity. Also, a particular food, if you see that the child has taken and it is causing a trigger and the behavior suddenly becomes more hyperactive and impulsive, those needs to be kept a track of.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure that answered Miss Daphne's question. Next, we have Miss Shaista with us. Okay, so let me post a question on her behalf. So she says that she has one of my student with ADHD and ASD to how to help them develop interest and cooperate during the sessions. So the child is actually non-conforming and not cooperating during the sessions, which is actually the reverse of what happens in the regular classroom. So what can Miss Shaista do during her session to build the rapport with the child?
Yes. So exactly, the rapport is the key word here. When we pull out children, they feel that what is wrong with me, their self-esteem gets affected, and sometimes they are like, no, I want to be in the regular class. Why am I being pulled out? So if you're asking that from the point of a special educator, it is very important that the initial classes we don't give them overwhelming tasks or tasks which are not of their interest. So make your initial sessions so lively, so enjoyable for the child that more than the regular class, they would want to come to you. So engage in certain cognitive building activities, something colorful, ask them to do what they like, bring things and show you, talk about it of what they like. Develop interest. How you develop interest is by building rapport. How are you building rapport is by talking about things that are of their interest, getting down to their level and playing interesting games and activities with them. So again, you could play a lot of things of talking. So if I tell you a thing, you go bring it to me, and a lot of our strategies had been discussed in our previous webinars where you are engaging children to boost their cognitive skills like their attention and also so that they can control themselves. So now when you are working with these children to develop their interest, talk about their interesting things, how their day was, what are the games they love to play online. So at that point of time, first let them to communicate with you. Communication, open communication, two-way communication. Then you could get on to getting them onto the task and activities. First is communication and rapport building, where they're open to sharing their ideas and they stop feeling bad that they have been pulled out. So that notion has to be removed.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Again, lovely insights, because rapport building is the key to for any intervention to work, and finding the child's interest and working on those lines is the best way to go about building rapport. Next, we have Miss Maria with us. So, Ms. Maria's question is about medication Ritalin that's being prescribed to children with ADHD to calm them down. So, what are your thoughts about it? If you could share certain insights, that would be great.
Yes. See, medication is given to individuals who are high on ADHD. Personally, see, every individual or every therapist has different views when it comes to dealing with a kind of special need. So when I have to talk about my personal needs, personal view about medication of ADHD, it is the last resort. If you have tried all other things and still it is not working, then you get into medication. While the child is on medication, it is important to see the positive as well as the negative consequences, and try to talk to your pediatrician or talk to the clinical psychologist who has prescribed, or the psychiatrist, as to how can we reduce the dependency. Very, very important. Even if the child has started the medication, it is important that it does not become a lifelong process or a long term intervention. You could discuss as to how we could reduce and what could be the alternatives. Also, you can foresee the dietary restrictions. There is a lot of information about the diet restrictions for ADHD, and sugar and restrictions, white products. If you could work on these little things along with therapeutic intervention of occupational therapy, or if they have sensory issues, or if there are certain other things, like even swimming works very, very well for children with ADHD. So if these little things are imbibed, though it is going to be a long term process, the child would have long term impact of it as well. But when we talk of medication, there are pros and cons. So it is important to have a detailed discussion and see that the dependency on the medication is reduced over time.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think this will be a great information for all of us to decide, and also decide upon what kind of intervention we are planning to go with, whether medication is a solution or going for therapy would actually help the child in the long run. Next, we have Mr. Prabhu.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Go.
Madam, actually, during the online examination, madam, due to this online education, okay, one time what happened, my son, to search the examination, how to search the examination question papers, the answers in the Google, unfortunately, I told him to get the answer. Past 1 year, any online examination, he used to search the question. He is really smart, He take the question, copy the question, and he put in the Google search. And I don't know, he find the answer immediately, and he is attending like that way the examination. The first question, I want to stop him, and I want to be honest to read well and write the examination like that. I want to practice my son. And the second one he is too much addictive with Google, and always in laptop, even though the examination time, education, apart from the education.
Right.
So I want both.
So, when we talk about this kind of behavior that you told me, how does it stem from? It stems from our own advice that we had given to the child. Now, the child has got an easy way out that I don't have to study. All answers are right in front of me in my screen when I Google. So, that kind of behavior has to be, curbed with constant effort from your end as a parent. So, you need to sit through a few tests so that the urge to go to Google and search is curbed. Very, very important. Sometimes what we do is we just give instruction, don't go to Google, read, read, read. But sometimes we need to put in extra effort by being beside the child and being like, no, you are not going to go to Google. Even if he fails the test, it is absolutely okay. But because you are working on behavior modification, we need to allow that to happen and make the child read for the test. So constant monitoring and sitting beside the child till it becomes a pattern and his able to control resist and his action is important. Second, he's a lot of on screen because of the pandemic. A lot of children don't have access to anything around. The only thing is there's a lot of exposure of screen time. So you could indulge them in family time, allow them to go down if there's a provision to play for a few hours where they can at least unwind themselves, or play if there have been siblings, or have a family time to play a particular board game, so that you're at least distracting them from the screen time, because screen also has adverse effects on health. So if we are allowing children to engage in passive screen time, there's going to be irritation, temper tantrums, aggressiveness also increase in children. If you might have noticed, the moment we tell them it's time for you to close your laptop, that time never comes for them. For them, it's 24/7 using the screen. So when you have to curb that, we need to get more involved with the child, play more activities where their child is engaged without the screen. Otherwise, the only thing you would get is I am bored. So when we have nothing in hand, we are also like, okay, watch TV or watch your games. So parental involvement strategies need to be created. Go for a walk on the terrace, or be like, I need to talk to you. We'll play certain games, or you just, again, this all depends on the level of the child. You come up and be like, okay, it is time for us to, you know, go bring. You can also engage them in grocery shopping if they're like the teenagers. Be like, okay, we are going to buy certain things. I want you to come along. Again, depends on the situation. The key point here is parental involvement must increase. And how can you increase is you could see your home scenario or your situation of a particular city, and then decide how can I engage my child more in certain aspects rather than the screen time. So alternatives have to be brainstormed by us as adults, and then help the child engage in those.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So I think as parents, we have to come up with a lot of alternatives right now, given today's situation, because everybody is like at home most times, and there are restricted number of options that we have. So giving the child with a positive and an appropriate action, because the child sometimes will not be able to think that big. So as parents, it becomes very important for them to give them those alternatives so that it helps the children. Next, we have Mr. Maninder Kaur. Okay, so let me pose the question on behalf of the participant. So her question is that the child is 14 years old and the brain development is not according to his age. The child is currently in grade 7. However, he is not able to understand any information or instruction that is given to the child. So if you could share some strategies on how to go about it, that would be very helpful.
So before getting into strategy, since you state that the brain development is not age level and the child is not able to process instructions, very important suggestion, please go for an IQ testing to know the level of the child. Based on that, the recommendations would be given by the clinical psychologist how you can progress based on the level of the child that comes. So when you see that the child is not having the brain development or not processing instructions as per the level or age of the child, it's always better to get into the IQ assessment to understand the child holistically.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure that helps Miss Maninder Kaur. Next, we have Mr. David, who has a question for you.
Okay. Buenos días, Shivani. ¿Cómo estás? My question is, okay, how we should put the 5-point scale for the to monitor people with autism and thing, for about the anger thing from carried on the incredible 5-point scale.
Okay, so the 5-point scale for?
Yes, it is it's for regulating the people with autism, and like if you're angry or something, it's on 5-point, and it's done by Miss Carridon of Minnesota in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that comes for autism. So this is ADHD. So for ADHD, we have the Vanderbilt rating scale.
Yes. Okay, thanks for letting me know about my question. Gracias, senora.
Thank you so much. So I hope that answered your question. Next we have Miss Sashtya with her question. Okay, so before we have Sasha's question, let's take another question. So, child, yes, ma'am, do we have you with us? Because she wants to pose the question directly to you. Yes, please go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, ma'am, I just wanted to speak to regarding the question which I had just now spoken to you. The child is in grade 1. Okay, he is having ASD and ADHD. Like the teacher has been giving me good remarks, like he is cooperating in the class, he is he is listening, watching others do, and he is doing whatever things are being done in the class. He's doing all the activities, but I just don't know. I have tried all the ways of rapport building. I've given him so many interesting games and different activities, but he is not ready to look at the screen. He doesn't look at the screen, and he keeps on doing whatever he wants to. He sings, he'll be looking somewhere else, and he will suddenly scream, or he'll be singing at a very loud voice. If I give him any reading activity, he will not listen. After continuous pestering from his mother's side and my side, then he will read, but it will be like in his own pace and at his own speed. He will start, either he will read very fast and he will not know when he started and when he finished, or he will be suddenly the pitch should be very high, suddenly it will be very low, and you never know when he started, when he finished. So it is at his own pace. He never follows any instructions. And then when I've been discussing with the about this with at the end of the session with the mother, like how do we just to plan how to make the sessions better, how to make it more interesting for him, including whatever things he enjoys. But then the mother, I think the parent has taken it otherwise, and they have now told that no, we will not, we will discontinue the sessions for him because the child is not, doesn't seem to be enjoying the pull out sessions. And
Okay, so
so
you're a special educator who's helping the child.
yes, ma'am.
So first thing here is a child is ASD. So when a comorbidity is there, like ADHD, ASD, or ADHD, LD, ADHD, ID, we need to see which one is the more prominent one and which needs to be worked first. So here in children with autism, ASD is more this thing that is of a concern, then comes ADHD. So here eye contact, the child does not see the screen. That means the child is not able to sustain eye contact on things that require attention. So first thing is building of eye contact. Next, the child should learn to have verbal communication, expression of interest. That has to be developed. After, along with that, you work with the attention strategies. So here I don't have a complete case history of the child to devise an IEP, but what I can suggest you here is work on the ASD symptoms first, particularly the eye contact, where again you need the help of the parent, where they're understanding what the issue of the child is. When the child is behaving in these ways and constantly getting negative consequences for whatever efforts he's putting in, then the child would backfire, be like, I'm not, gives up. The child just gives up that I'm not doing and gets overwhelming for the child. So, very important, work on the eye contact, work on the ASD symptoms that are being present, but take it on the level of priority. Start working one by one and not everything together. So, make a list of issues the child is having, then prioritize those issues and start giving intervention based on those issues. Again, you need the support and psychoeducation of parents, and this is very, very important because those activities need to be done, once done by you, given practice by the parent, so that they become a sustainable thing in the child.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure that answers Shastya's question, and we also have a response from her. So we have multiple questions in terms of handling temper tantrums. If you could share some insights about that, it would be great, ma'am.
So, when does a temper tantrum occur? That is the first thing that we need to keep in mind. What is the trigger point that has made the child react this way? So, at that point of time, when we see that the child is reacting this way because the needs were not met, the attention was not given, or the child did not have support, child was not able to verbally express, we need to figure out what is that one thing the child was lacking which led to temper tantrum. Second, we need to see that when the initial temper tantrum was thrown and now the temper tantrum intensity has increased, how we dealt with it with the child. So, if we had positively reinforced the child, there's a lot of likeliness that that temper tantrum would repeat with higher intensity. If we would have let go and not paid attention to it, it would have reduced in intensity with time. Because if that is reinforced, the child realizes that uh, when I am doing a particular thing, I am getting what I want. So at that point of time, the child realizes I need something, I'm going to throw a tantrum. And if you give in to it, you have given into what the child wants. And if you have been like, okay, I am not going to give you do whatever, and I've been consistent in my rule, there's less likeliness for the child to come out of it. So when we talk about temper tantrums, we need to understand the trigger and our reaction to it. Also remember, in temper tantrums, please do not give reinforcement even if the intensity is increasing. Once the child calms down, you can talk it out to the child. We need to maintain our calm. We need to show emotional regulation. Only then will the child learn to model that. So if a child is screaming that I want this, and you also scream that I am not buying you that, Khatam. That's a emotional dysregulation that is happening between two individuals. So you need to maintain your calm and be like, remember, this is what I had told you. So we have to maintain our own calm while dealing with children in times of temper tantrums.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Lovely insight again. I think consistency is again a key because we have to be consistent with what we're doing so that the child also learns that this is the appropriate way to behave. If we give in once, then there are a lot of chances that the child will engage in the same behavior to get whatever he or she wants. There are a lot of questions coming in, but we'll take the last few questions for today. The next question, in extension to the tantrum question, is there a difference between tantrum and meltdown? If you could share some light about it, that would be good.
Basically what happens in a tantrum is whatever they want, they are behaving in that particular manner. Meltdown is where they are finding a safe environment to calm themselves down. Temper tantrum occurs in any kind of environment. Meltdown occurs in an environment where they usually feel safe. And basically, when we talk about the tantrum is basically for demands to be met, but the reaction to subside for that is a meltdown.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure that made it clear to all our participants. The last question for today, which is an interesting one. So children find it very difficult to move from an activity that is of great interest to them to a least interested activity. That's when they tend to engage in all these tantrumy behaviors. So how to make the transition from a very highly interested activity to the least interested activity?
So what have we done here? We have started from the highly interested activity and got them to the least interested activity. The best way to do is tell them that you finish this and you give them the activity of high interest. So you're doing a vice versa, where they finish the least interested activity faster and come to do the high interesting activity. So when you are working with children, balance your sessions or plan your sessions in such a way that you don't do all the interesting activities at one go and then come to least interesting activities. You alternate them or take it from least to high so that they're able to sustain their attention for a longer period of time. So if you see that your child is resisting to write, you start with two-line writing. Then be like, okay, wonderful, you've done this. Now we do a worksheet. If you do this, we quickly do this and get to your favorite game. You win this game, we do this activity again, back to a writing task. So your planning has to be effective, where you are involving a correct ratio of least interested and high interested, but ensure don't start with high interesting activities. Yes, your communication, rapport building always starts with high interesting activities, but over time, you need to set targets that you finish this, we are moving on to the interesting activities. You take 15 minutes for it, you will have only 5 minutes for your high interested activities. You finish this in 5 minutes, you have 15 minutes for that. So you motivate your child in such a manner and plan your strategies effectively so that all areas are covered.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So being creative as a therapist is very important in order for us to help the child also to learn multiple skills and also to equip them with multiple components and techniques per se. So that brings us to the end of today's Q&A discussion. I'm sure a lot of people would have benefited from the Q&A discussion because a lot of interesting questions. I've seen that the feedback link is being shared already, but do take a moment out to let us know your thoughts so that we'll be able to improve the services and experience with all of you. We also have an upcoming event on positive behavioral support because a lot of you have a lot of questions with that of how to manage behavior. We have an upcoming webinar on the 22nd July. If you're interested for the same, the registration link is being shared right now in the chat box. Also, we have an upcoming event by Mr. Gerd Winkler on how to turn around the challenging situations during sessions to make it interesting and proactive for children. A lot of people who are finding it difficult to build rapport could actually join the session and learn a lot of strategies and techniques from Mr. Gerd Winkler. If you're interested for the same, do register using the link that's being shared right now in the chat box. I would like to now check with Ms. Shivani as to how her experience has been with us and also about her final thoughts to all our participants today.
Thank you so much. I hope that these strategies would be beneficial for you to use it. learn to understand what is the age of the child and how we as therapists can become more innovative and creative with them, so that it is very different from the regular classrooms and they love and enjoy our classes. I wish all of you all the very best in helping all these children out there. And yes, my experience has definitely been nice with Team Ability. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you all participants for actively participating and being engaging throughout today's session with a lot of questions and inputs, helping each other out in the chat box. Until we see you for the next time, it's a big bye from Team Ability. Take care and stay safe, and stay tuned for all further updates from Team Ability.